Imagine this. You're stepping into a brand new job, okay? First day. The first day jitters are, well, they're doing a full body dance, right? Your to-do list is already stretching into next week, and you're trying desperately to remember everyone's name while also just figuring out where the coffee machine is. Standard stuff. Now, layer on top of all that, the entire environment, every sign, every conversation, every single instruction is in a language you're still mastering. That right there is the kind of exhilarating, maybe slightly terrifying, and profoundly human challenge we're diving into today. This deep dive is all about learning English on the job. We're drawing directly from the vivid, real-world experiences of someone navigating their very first professional role in an English-speaking environment. And our mission is really to unpack the most important nuggets of knowledge from this incredibly relatable narrative.
We want to turn what might seem like personal struggles into truly practical, actionable insights for anyone out there looking to gain knowledge quickly and truly thrive, no matter the context they find themselves in. We've got some fantastic excerpts here from The First Day at Work, Learning English on the Real World, specifically Episode 6. It's a narrative that is, well, it's motivational, it's genuinely relatable, and honestly, even a little humorous in places, which, always helps. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is that this isn't just a story about learning a language, although that's obviously a huge part of it. It's really a much broader narrative about adaptation, about resilience, and about the profoundly immersive nature of real-world learning. Think about it. In a classroom, usually you're in a controlled space, right? You've got a syllabus, maybe a clear path, rules for making mistakes. There's a safety net.
Right. Less pressure, maybe?
Definitely less pressure of a certain kind, because on the job, the pressure is fundamentally different. Your actual performance, those really crucial initial impressions you make, your ability to fit in, to understand tasks, to do the tasks, all of that is immediately, undeniably on the line. It's a high-stakes arena. Every single interaction, every email you send, every little casual chat by the water cooler, it's a live lesson. And you get immediate feedback, whether someone tells you directly or you just see it in their reaction.
That's intense.
It is. And that's precisely why this experience, Sami's experience that we'll explore, resonates so widely. It connects to this broader idea of embracing any new, potentially overwhelming information environment. Could be a language, sure, but it could just as easily be learning a complex new technical skill, or figuring out the tricky dynamics of a new team, or even just diving into a completely unfamiliar field of study. Sami's journey really shows how stepping into that discomfort, embracing that initial awkwardness, well, it can actually be one of the most powerful catalysts for genuine accelerated growth. It's like learning to swim by, being tossed in the deep end. And surprisingly, finding you actually have the tools to float and eventually to really start moving forward.
Absolutely. It's that sink or swim feeling, but maybe with some hidden lifelines, if you know where to look for them. And Sami's story, like you said, it starts even before he walks through the office door. It's the morning rush for him, but it's clearly so much more than just hitting snooze. The source tells us he woke up way before sunrise, practically buzzing. A mix of excitement and nerves, too keyed up, really, to get any more sleep. And then there's this moment that I think everyone can relate to before a big day.
Yeah.
He checks his bag, not once, not twice, but like 5 times.
Yes.
He's ticking off the essentials: notebook, pen, ID card. And then there's this nervous, but also kind of funny internal thought. He adds, .confidence. And then he mutters to himself, still finding that one.
Oh, that's perfect.
It's such a universal feeling, isn't it? Those pre-job jitters, that desperate search for confidence before a big challenge. But for Sami, with a whole new language in the mix, that search for confidence takes on this entirely new, incredibly complex layer.
It really does.
It's not just about being good at the job. It's about feeling competent, and maybe more importantly, confident in expressing that competence in a language that isn't your first. It just amplifies every worry, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. And that contrast is so telling. The meticulous physical preparation, the notebook, the pen, the ID card, those are tangible things. They're within his control.
Right, ticking the boxes.
Exactly. They provide a sort of foundational sense of readiness, a structure. It's almost like a ritual, grounding him. But then you hit that elusive thing, emotional preparedness, that search for confidence. It just perfectly highlights this often overlooked psychological dimension of walking into any new high-pressure situation. It reminds us that really setting yourself up for success, it involves more than just practical checklists. It means you have to acknowledge the unknowns, prepare mentally as best you can, and recognize that confidence.
Well, it often isn't something you just find fully formed waiting in your bag or at the door.
You have to build it. You build it. incrementally. Through experience, through those small wins, and yeah, even through navigating the mistakes. It's like packing for a trip, maybe. You know the destination, but you don't know every single stop or detour along the way.
Good analogy.
You prepare what you can, you plan for contingencies, maybe pack an umbrella just in case, and for the rest. You rely on your adaptability, your resilience. But that act of preparing the physical stuff, checking the bag 5 times, that can be a way to channel that nervous energy, create a sense of control over something when so much else feels uncertain.
That makes a lot of sense. And before he even walks out the door, he gets this piece of advice from his mother. It sounds so simple, but it's just incredibly profound. She packed on a small lunch, that gesture of care, and whispered these 3 things. Speak clearly, smile. And remember, no one is perfect.
Wow.
For a language learner heading into their first professional job, that's not just advice, it's like pure gold. It hits both the practical side of communication and that really crucial piece of self-acceptance.
Yeah.
It's not saying be perfect, it's saying be understood, be open, and give yourself a break.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, like you said, these aren't just tips for someone learning English. They are fundamentally basic human principles for navigating any new, complex, maybe even overwhelming environment, linguistic or otherwise.
Let's break them down then. Speak clearly.
Right, speak clearly. That immediately shifts the focus away from trying to achieve perfect grammar, which can be absolutely paralyzing for learners.
Totally.
The goal isn't necessarily to sound like a native speaker on day one, it's to make sure your message gets across. That's liberating advice, isn't it? It encourages prioritizing being understood, which builds confidence, even if the sentences aren't quite right.
And prevents misunderstandings early on, hopefully.
Hopefully, yes. Then smile. This one is huge because it's nonverbal. It completely transcends language barriers. A smile signals openness, approachability, warmth, a willingness to connect. It can just instantly diffuse potential tension or awkwardness in a new interaction. It's like a universal welcome sign.
That's a positive tone right away.
Exactly. And finally, the big one. No one is perfect. This is the crucial lesson in self-compassion. It's permission to make mistakes. In language learning, making errors isn't just going to happen. It's absolutely essential. It's how you test things out, how you get feedback, whether someone corrects you or just looks confused, and how you refine your understanding.
It's data gathering, really.
It is data gathering. And that principle is just as vital for learning any new skill or adapting to any new job. If you demand perfection from yourself right out of the gate, you risk freezing up, becoming too scared to even try. So Sammy's mother, with those few simple words, she basically gave him this profound understanding. Effort, progress, and being okay with imperfection are way more important than flawless execution, especially at the start. It's like she handed him a psychological safety net before he even left home.
That's beautifully put. So, okay, armed with his mom's wisdom, the packed lunch, and probably a very nervous, hopeful smile, Sami arrives. And that immediate immersion you talked about, it hits him right away. He sees a tall building, glass doors, and signs everywhere in English. Instantly, the environment isn't just new, it's actively demanding cognitive processing in his second language.
The pressure's on.
Yeah. And then, the very first human interaction in his professional life, reception. A cheerful lady greets him, "Hi there, you must be Sami." And the source says Sami literally froze. His brain is just screaming this frantic internal voice, "Say yes! Say yes!"
Oh, I can feel that.
But what actually comes out is this wonderful, hesitant, totally endearing jumble. Yes, I am. It is me.
Ha, bless him.
But here's where it gets really interesting, and it's such a testament to, good human interaction. The receptionist doesn't judge. She just chuckled, with real warmth apparently, and said, "You're fine. Come, I'll show you around."
That's key. That reaction is everything.
It really is. That immediate immersion and that first slightly awkward interaction, they set the stage perfectly, highlighting both the challenge and how critical external support can be.
Yeah, that interaction is just a textbook example of the huge cognitive load involved in processing spoken language in real time, especially under pressure. Sami knew the answer. His brain was yelling it. But the simple act of forming and producing the right words, that was the hurdle.
The gap.
That's the classic freezing phenomenon, so common for language learners. Even basic phrases just vanish in the moment. It shows that big gap between receptive skills, what you understand, and productive skills, what you can actually say fluently and accurately.
You get it, but but you can't quite get it out.
Exactly. You understand the question, you know the answer, but the neural pathways for speaking spontaneously, they're just not quite firing in sync yet, especially under stress. But as you said, the receptionist's reaction is absolutely crucial. Her chuckle, the reassuring, "you're fine," those acted as powerful nonverbal signals. They immediately eased his tension.
Like deflating a balloon of anxiety.
Perfectly put. It showed acceptance, understanding, and crucially, permission to be imperfect. It sent that implicit message. Mistakes are okay. Effort is valued. The intent to communicate matters more than perfect grammar right now. That immediate positive feedback right at the start, it creates this critical psychological safety net. It lets the learning continue.
Yeah, because if she'd reacted differently.
If she'd looked impatient or confused, Sami might have just shut down. He might have retreated into silence, lost learning opportunities, or felt so embarrassed it became a real setback. That little moment of grace from her was huge. It likely fueled his courage for the rest of the day.
And the immersion, yeah, it definitely didn't stop there. She immediately launches into what sounds like a whirlwind office tour. That's HR, this is IT, that's the break room. Just this flood of information, names, functions, acronyms, probably.
Acronyms, always the acronym.
Right. And Sami's coping mechanism during this onslaught, it was critical and I think really insightful for anyone facing information overload. He nodded politely, but understood only about 30% of what she said. But crucially, he wasn't paralyzed by understanding so little. Instead, he smiled and whispered to himself this powerful internal instruction. Don't panic. Listen more.
That is brilliant.
That strategic mental approach, prioritizing listening over immediate total understanding. That's a lesson right there.
It really is. And that 30% comprehension, that's not failure, not at all. It's the absolutely normal, even expected reality of real immersion. When you're dropped into a completely new linguistic environment, especially one full of specialized jargon, like an office, your brain is working overtime just to get the gist. You can't expect to understand every single word. It's unrealistic. Instead, it's about actively listening for keywords, for familiar patterns, for contextual clues. Anything that helps you piece together meaning, even if it's incomplete.
So focusing on what you can catch, not what you're missing.
Precisely. And Sami's "don't panic, listen more" internal monologue, that's a fantastic self-regulation strategy. It's consciously deciding not to get bogged down by the missed details, but instead to focus on absorbing what you can. Trusting that the bigger picture will emerge over time with more exposure. Think of it like trying to drink from a fire hose. You can't catch every drop, right?
Right. You drown.
Exactly. But you can get enough to survive, to understand the general flow, and this initial phase of what linguists call comprehensible input. Basically, language you understand enough to get the gist, even if not every word.
Even if it's only 30% gist.
Even if it's partial. It's incredibly powerful. Your brain starts recognizing sounds, rhythms, patterns in the new language, even subconsciously. It's building this foundational layer of familiarity. It's preparing the neural pathways for deeper understanding later on. So that seemingly passive act of just listening more is actually incredibly active mentally. It lays crucial groundwork for faster learning down the road.
That's a great way to think about it. The background work the brain is doing even when you feel lost. Okay, so foundation being laid, listening hard. Soon enough, Sami was put to the practical test. He gets assigned to a friendly supervisor, Mr. Kamal, who gives him what seemed like simple tasks, updating some Excel sheets, writing short email replies. But as anyone who's learned a language for work knows, simple can be incredibly deceptive, can it?
Oh, absolutely. The gap between simple instruction and professional execution can be vast.
Yeah. So Sami stares at the laptop. In his first attempt at an email, the source tells us, was this very direct, very raw translation straight from his mind. It reflects his basic understanding. Hello, I am Sami. I work now. I send file. Thank you.
Very functional.
Very functional.
Yeah.
The source even adds humorously, Lena will fainted, which I love, just hinting at that huge gap between basic communication and, professional politeness.
The expected norms.
Exactly. Then, he didn't just send that. He stopped, he looked at it, and he rewrote it. The transformation is quite remarkable. It goes from that raw output to, Dear Sir, please find the attached file. Let me know if you need any changes. Best regards, Sami.
Much better.
Much better. And the description says he did this with shaking hands, feeling the weight of this professional world, whispered, much better, before clicking send. So what does this tell us? What's the takeaway here about learning to communicate professionally in a new language, especially when the stakes feel so incredibly high?
Well, This email rewrite just perfectly illustrates that significant, often surprising gap between conversational English and professional English. It's not just about knowing individual words, it's about understanding the specific vocabulary, the expected tone, the conventional phrasing like please find attached or best regards, and the structure required in a business context.
Things you might never use just chatting.
Exactly. These are specific conventions, polite formulas that might not be obvious if your main focus has been basic sentences or everyday conversation. But this moment also really highlights the process of learning, the iterative nature of it. Sami didn't just settle for his first draft.
He reflected.
He reflected on it, recognized it wasn't quite right for the context, and actively self-corrected. This act of metacognition, basically, thinking about your own thinking, learning how you learn, is absolutely vital for any skill acquisition.
Like stepping outside yourself for a second.
Exactly. It's the difference between just repeating a task and actually understanding why you made a mistake or why something could be better, and then figuring out how to improve it next time. Think of a musician practicing a piece. They don't just play it over and over. They listen, identify the tricky parts, analyze why they're tricky, and adjust their technique. Sami did that instinctively with the email.
Recognizing the need for a different technique for professional communication.
Precisely. That conscious reflection is incredibly powerful for speeding up learning. And that detail about his shaking hands, that's so important.
And it makes it real.
It makes it real. It reminds us of the pressure, the vulnerability, the courage involved in these early attempts. It takes real guts to put yourself out there, to risk looking imperfect, especially when your professional image feels like it's on the line.
That courage is necessary, isn't it?
It's fundamentally necessary for growth. You can compare it to learning any complex new software or process at work. That initial struggle is real, you get frustrated, but then something clicks, the breakthrough, and that feeling of accomplishment fuels you to keep going, building confidence along the way.
That's a perfect parallel.
Yeah.
And yeah, there wasn't just the emails. Even seemingly simple, casual office chat became its own kind of communication gauntlet for Sami. At lunchtime, a coworker asks him, completely innocently, "Hey, Sami, how's your first day?" Now, Sami wanted to say, and he formulated it perfectly in his head, "I'm learning a lot and enjoying the experience." You know, a normal, nuanced, professional kind of response.
That's good.
Sounds great. But what actually came out was that raw, unpolished output again.
I am.
Yeah.
Very fine. I do work. Good.
Oh, dear. But relatable.
So relatable. That gap between internal thought and external delivery that so many learners face. The coworker, to their credit, apparently just blinked for maybe half a second, then smiled warmly and said, "Well, welcome. We're glad to have you."
Another moment of grace. Good coworker. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But Sami's internal reaction is, again, key to his mindset. He laughed inside, acknowledging the awkwardness, right? But then immediately followed it with this determined thought. One day, I'll say it better.
That's the growth mindset right there.
That's self-awareness plus the resolve. It's fantastic.
It really is. And this interaction just profoundly highlights that difference again. Receptive skills versus productive skills. Understanding versus speaking. Sami clearly understood the question. He even formulated a complex, appropriate answer internally. But the challenge is translating that thought into fluid, grammatically sound, natural-sounding English, spontaneously, under pressure.
It's like mental gymnastics.
It is. It requires rapid word recall, accurate grammar structuring, pronunciation, all happening in microseconds. It's often where learners feel most exposed. And again, the coworker's empathetic response is crucial. Their patience, their understanding, it provides that supportive environment. It signals that imperfection is okay, effort is valued.
Reinforces that safety net.
Exactly. Instead of correcting and looking impatient, they validated his attempt and offered a simple, welcoming message. And Sami's underlying motivation, that internal promise, one day I'll say it better, that highlights that critical growth mindset, the belief that you can improve through effort.
Which you need to keep going.
Absolutely. It's crucial for sustained learning in any area, not just language, which does raise an important question for us and maybe for you listening. How do these small, maybe slightly awkward interactions, the ones that can feel embarrassing in the moment, how do they actually contribute so significantly to long-term fluency?
Yeah.
Because each one is like a mini practice session, a low-stakes experiment. You test your language, you get feedback, even if it's just a patient smile or a slightly confused look, and then you mentally note it and iterate for the next time. They build resilience, they chip away at the fear of speaking, they gradually expand your comfort zone, moving you from just understanding to actually participating. Every stumble, if you learn from it, is genuinely a step forward. It solidifies the path.
Okay, so the awkwardness is actually productive. Good to know. So as the week went on, Sammy inevitably faced what the source calls a week of missteps. Though, based on what you just said, maybe we should call them a week of productive data gathering.
Huh. I like that. Productive data gathering.
Our source doesn't hold back, detailing these wonderfully relatable, sometimes genuinely funny errors. He apparently said, "I am boring," in a meeting, when he clearly meant "I am bored."
Ah, the classic Ing versus Ed confusion. Yes.
He called a spreadsheet a sheet spread, a classic kind of phonetic or structural mix-up many learners will recognize.
Happens all the time.
And then, in what must have been a truly stomach-dropping moment, he confused reply all with reply and accidentally CC'd the CEO.
Ouch. High stakes data point, that one.
Definitely high stakes. Each of these moments, well, probably cringe-inducing for Sammy at the time, they're so memorable. They really speak to the real-world trials of learning a language in a professional setting. Like you said, they're linguistic landmines you step on, and hopefully learn where not to step next time.
They are absolutely productive errors. Not failures, but crucial data points. Let's quickly break them down because each teaches something different. The "I am boring" example. Perfect illustration of that tricky nuance with English adjectives ending in ing. They describe the thing causing the feeling, like the meeting is boring. And ig describes the person feeling it, Sammy is bored.
A very common tripwire.
Very common. And making that mistake publicly often solidifies the correct usage because the feedback, even if just internal embarrassment, is so memorable. It's a linguistic light bulb moment, often born from a slightly awkward dimness.
Right. And sheet spread.
That's a common phonetic or structural mix-up. The brain's trying to process unfamiliar compound words or phrases, sometimes reversing them or getting tangled. It shows the brain actively trying to map new sounds and structures onto what it already knows. Sometimes the map is a bit off, but it's part of internalizing complex terms.
Still part of the process.
Definitely. And the reply all blunder, while maybe the most embarrassing, it's also arguably the most impactful learning moment.
Because the consequences are immediate and visible.
Exactly. It's a real-world, immediate consequence that teaches a critical lesson, not just about language, but about professional communication tools, digital etiquette, the importance of double-checking in a workplace context. So these errors, they aren't shortcomings. They're vital data points. Reframing them as learning opportunities, failing forward, it's so effective because it reduces the fear of trying. It turns potential shame into, okay, what happened there? How do I fix that?
Which raises that question you posed earlier. How do we cultivate an environment, or maybe just a personal mindset, where these mistakes are seen as opportunities? How do you personally do that?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Part of it is self-compassion, allowing yourself to be imperfect, especially when learning. Part of it is adopting what I sometimes call a scientist's mindset.
Okay, explain that.
Well, a scientist runs experiments. Some experiments yield the expected results, others don't. But every result is data. It tells you something. So view your mistakes not as personal failures, but as data points. Okay, that approach didn't work. Why? What does this data tell me about my current understanding or skill? Practically. Maybe keep a small log, not to dwell, but to notice patterns. Are you always mixing up the same two words? Do you struggle with a particular politeness phrase? Knowing what kind of mistakes you make helps you target your learning.
Be your own researcher.
Be your own researcher, and maybe practice rehearsal without judgment. If you have a big presentation or an important email, try saying it out loud first, just to yourself. Make the mistakes in private, catch them, correct them. It builds muscle memory for the real thing and lowers the stakes a bit.
That makes sense. And Sammy, clearly being a proactive learner, didn't just make mistakes and hope for the best. He had this brilliant, super practical solution that really anyone could adopt. He kept a notebook.
The notebook, yes.
The source says he meticulously logged new phrases he encountered. He was basically building his own personalized dictionary of workplace English. Phrases like, please advise, looking forward to your response, as discussed.
The building block.
Exactly, the professional building blocks, the common currency of office talk that he was actively collecting. And then there's that wonderfully funny FYI story. He initially thought it meant feed your idle, a nod to a popular South Indian breakfast dish.
That's fantastic. Shows how confusing acronyms can be out of context.
Totally. It highlights not just the challenge of decoding jargon and acronyms, which every workplace has, but also the immediate, tangible benefit of writing things down, asking questions, and actively figuring things out. He wasn't afraid to admit he didn't know.
And that notebook strategy is just profoundly effective for several reasons, and it really extends way beyond just learning a language. First, it leverages contextual learning. Like we said, he wasn't just memorizing isolated words from a list. He was capturing phrases directly from his real-world interactions.
So he knew how to use them, not just what they meant.
Precisely. He learned them in context, with their appropriate tone and register. This creates a personal dictionary, or a phrase book, tailored exactly to his immediate needs. This reinforces learning because it's relevant and immediately applicable. Second, it helps memory. The physical act of writing engages different parts of the brain. It makes information stickier. When you encounter something new, pausing to write it down, maybe with an example sentence from where you heard it, that solidifies the knowledge.
Like creating your own anchor point.
A perfect way to put it. Third, decoding jargon and acronyms, the FYI example. That's a universal challenge in any new professional setting. Doesn't matter if you're a native speaker starting a new industry or a language learner. Every field has its shorthand. Sami's initial confusion and then figuring it out. It shows the critical role of active inquiry and documentation. He didn't just ignore FYI, he noted it, probably looked it up or asked someone and then integrated it.
He tackled it head on.
Yes, and this practice of documenting your learning, creating your own reference guide, it extends far beyond language. Think about learning to code or understanding complex scientific ideas or getting your head around financial regulations. Keeping a personalized record of new terms, processes, insights, often grabbed from real problems or discussions, it's an incredibly powerful way to reinforce understanding, build expertise, and really empower self-directed learning.
It's about taking active ownership of your learning.
Exactly. Constantly refining your personal knowledge base based on real experience.
Okay, so all that consistent effort, the notebook, the small victories, the corrected missteps, the sheer persistence, it all led to this fantastic payoff at the end of his first week. Friday afternoon, Mr. Kamal, the supervisor, calls Sami to his desk, and the source says Sami gulped. You know, that universal feeling of dread washing over you, thinking, oh no, what did I do? Did I mess up again?
That fear of being called out.
Totally. But then, the surprise. Mr. Kamal doesn't criticize. Instead, he says something truly powerful. He looks Sami in the eye and says, you've done well this week. I can see you're learning fast, and you don't give up when things are unclear.
Wow. That's excellent feedback.
Isn't it? And Sami, naturally, the text says, smiled wide. So here's where it gets really interesting for me. The profound psychological impact of that kind of positive, specific feedback after putting in so much effort, being vulnerable, navigating all that uncertainty.
Yeah, what's fascinating there is that Mr. Kamal's compliment wasn't just about Sami's English getting better, although it certainly acknowledged his progress. Yes, he said Sami was learning fast, which implies improvement in English. But crucially, he highlighted Sami's underlying professional qualities.
Right, the second part. And you don't give up when things are unclear.
Exactly. That speaks directly to Sami's learning agility, his perseverance, his resilience, his proactive approach to problems. Mr. Kamal was observing Sami's effort, his attitude, his approach to challenges, not just whether his output was perfect yet.
Seeing the process, not just the product.
Precisely. And that's a huge lesson for managers, for mentors, for anyone observing someone new. Recognize and validate the qualities that drive success. The persistence, the curiosity, the resilience, not just the superficial results or initial flawlessness. For Sami, getting that external validation, it must have been immensely significant. After a week of awkward phrases, confusing acronyms, shaking hands while sending emails, probably internalizing every little slip-up.
He needed that.
He needed it. That explicit recognition would have been a massive boost to his motivation and, critically, his confidence. Remember his worry at the start of the week about still finding confidence?
Yeah, the missing item in his bag check.
This feedback directly addressed that. It showed him his efforts were seen, they were appreciated, and that his vulnerability in learning wasn't viewed as weakness, but actually as a strength. His persistence was valued. That single interaction, it just beautifully encapsulates the whole journey of learning and adaptation we've been talking about. It shows how real progress is often recognized through persistence, through being willing to engage with discomfort, and through the sheer courage to keep trying even when things are confusing.
It validates the struggle.
It validates the struggle and reinforces the idea that showing up, trying hard, being resilient, having that growth mindset, those things are often just as important, maybe even more important than perfect execution right away, especially when you're starting something new.
And what a journey it was, packed into just one incredibly insightful week. So let's maybe try and quickly recap the core actionable lessons we can pull from Sami's deep dive. And these lessons, they really do go far beyond just learning English. First, Embracing imperfection is absolutely
Yeah.
key. Making mistakes, as we've heard again and again, is not a roadblock. It's actually a critical path to understanding and learning faster. Every error is data.
Crucial data. Yep.
Second, active listening and having strategic coping mechanisms like Sami's internal "don't panic, listen more" mantras are vital when you're facing information overload in any new setting. Focus on getting the gist.
Don't try to drink the whole fire hose at once.
Exactly. Third, practical application and active self-correction like Sami rewriting that email or keeping his notebook. They accelerate learning way beyond just reading theory or passively watching. You have to do it to learn it.
Learning by doing, fundamentally.
Fourth, those mistakes we talked about, not failures. They're crucial data points for learning, especially if you approach them with that scientist mindset you mentioned. View them as experiments, not judgments on yourself.
Turn shame into curiosity.
Love that. And finally, the power of simple, tangible tools like a personal notebook for new phrases or concepts in navigating complex learning environments. It cannot be overstated. It's about taking ownership.
Making the learning your own.
Sami's story really just underscores the incredible value of real-world immersion for rapid skill acquisition in any field, language, software, new industry, anything.
Precisely. Sami's journey, while focused on English at work, it really is this powerful microcosm of learning anything new under pressure. His story illuminates these universal principles. Acquiring skills, adapting to new environments, navigating those inevitable information gaps, no matter what field you're in or what skill you're trying to master. It boils down to the courage to step into the unknown, the resilience to push through the discomfort and the awkwardness, and maybe the wisdom to learn from every interaction, every misstep, every small win.
So a challenge for you listening.
Yeah, consider your own learning journeys. Where have you leaned into discomfort? Where have you made mistakes, felt awkward, been overwhelmed by a flood of new stuff? And how have you found your own notebook strategies, your personal ways of capturing, organizing, making sense of new knowledge when you're facing something unfamiliar or challenging? How can you take the lessons from Sami's really remarkable first week and apply them to your next challenge? Whether that's a new project, a completely new role, or maybe just grappling with a complex piece of information that feels a bit daunting right now.
Makes you think.
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. What does Sami's experience ultimately tell us about the ultimate teacher of any new skill, which might just be the real world itself with all its messy, unpredictable challenges and those surprising, unexpected moments of clarity? It seems it's often right there in the messy, sometimes high-stakes reality that the most impactful and the most lasting learning truly happens.